Well. Wednesday, July 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm Bob Harris. This is the Football Diehards YouTube channel. It's time for the On the Hot Seat. And as usual, I have a fantastic guest who I shall introduce momentarily. First, FootballDiehards.com is the website. We appreciate you joining us here on our YouTube channel every Wednesday at this time. Also, on Saturdays at noon Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything live streams. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, all the YouTube stuff. If you haven't already, and I hope you have, and if you have done those things, hit the like button. I'm going to hit the dislike button just so somebody can pop that one off there and get it out of the way. Hello, Jim Furry. Hello, JSC. Glad you could all make it. I hope a few more come into the crowd here. Questions, comments, suggestions, associated chicanery goes in the chat. We'll work our way through all that. I mentioned we're here every Saturday, but not this Saturday. That's because I'll be at the Community Beer here in Dallas with a large group of friends for the live Scott Fish Bowl draft in the Wingstop division, along with some serious players, Fantasy Sven, Ray Garvin, Eric Moody, and also my guest tonight, the one and only Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. Follow him on Twitter at dbro_FFB. You all already do that. If you don't, shame on you. Derek, how are you, man?
Bob, what's going on, baby? First round is on me Saturday. I'm ready to rock and roll, man.
It should be a good time. Brian Quinlan, the street free agent on Twitter, kind enough to get the setup. Casey Kasem out there doing the real work, setting up, organizing this whole thing. There'll be an auction, and we'll be rolling through that. And charitable cause, Fantasy Cares, you can still donate. Go there now, fantasycares.org/donate. Put in some money, make this thing work. Make it huge, make lots of money. It's such a great thing, Derek. We were both on the Podathon. I jumped on the Podathon. It was a Sunday morning. Eric Moody was on first. Then you were on. Eric gave me all kinds of actionable intelligence. He will be drafting at 12. I'm drafting 11. You're drafting at 5. Gave me all kinds of actionable intel. You gave me nothing, sir. Nothing.
That was purposeful, Bob. I saw you in the comments, and I'm like, I'm not giving this guy the edge. There's no, man. Like for real, like I love Sal. He's one of the best people in the industry, and like I got on there, and we just went sideways, man. Like we talked about everything but football for my 30 minutes.
I think I lost you there.
You got me, buddy?
Yeah, I got you. You're good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was a good time, man. I love Sal. He's one of the best in the business. I think we talked about life, love, everything in between. Maybe we got like about 30 seconds of football talk on the Podathon, but you know what? That's all good, man. Good times, good people, good talks.
It was a great segment, and I did not miss the football talk at all. I loved hearing your story a little bit. And by the way, so we're all in this business. We are all very busy people. Everyone who's out there in the content world, we're all just jamming on our own damn thing. Don't spend a lot of time consuming other people's product, except the prior. I consume that like crazy. Love it. Going back to the days of tags, but also, I mean, you picked it up. Pat did a great job filling in as well, but you've done a great job making that your own. Tell everyone out there who doesn't know, and people, if you don't know, you should know. Tell everyone what they can expect. Are we going to expect the same thing again this season? Because, man, I look forward to it.
Oh, thanks, Bob. And it's honestly one of those pinch me moments. I greatly respected Tags. Everybody that's ever heard my story and Tags' story, like, he's one of the reasons honestly, I'm doing this for a full-time basis, much less like at all. So for me, it's a blessing to have picked up the torch, and I'm writing the primer. And I will be, spoiler, I will be back writing the primer every single week. It will be out every Thursday. And yeah, I mean, it's game by game. It's old school. It's my 15 to 20K word love letter about that week in football and little inklings about myself, my family, and all things in between, man. So I look at it as a blessing. I love writing it weekly.
Yeah, I mean, we all love Tags. Tags is such a grinder, and remember him getting into business and working his way up, and it just I'll just say this: you do it justice, right? I mean, you picked up all the nuance, and I know I don't want to say it's derivative because it's not. I mean, it's an homage almost, that opening segment that we all read every week with that personal portion. You picked that up well and do all of it. Just really appreciate the work. So I wanted to say that. Hi, Andrea. Hello, Jim Furry. Hello, Alan Hepworth. Big mover and shaker in the Scott Fishbowl world. Alan working behind the scenes to make sure everyone happens. So appreciate you coming, JSC. Appreciate you. You guys all know the drill. If you have questions, throw them in there. We're going to talk about a few things here, Derek, and some things that, I mean, I've been doing way too many best balls already. I'm in the portion of my best ball season where I am basically going, geez, I have enough of everybody. I want guys I don't have, right? I'm just like diving in. I don't have enough of these. And so I want to talk about some of those guys. But first I want to talk about some guys let's hit the big news story this week. Alvin Kamara, legal issues out of the way, going to have, expedited path to discipline. I think it's coming. We'll find out soon enough. Well, how have you been approaching this up to this point? And will it change knowing resolution is coming? Or are you waiting for resolution?
I'm not waiting for resolution personally. I've been drafting him in best ball. I think I'm a little bit over about 120 teams right now deep into best ball season. So Alvin Kamara has been fitting all different types of builds, like regardless of how I'm structuring teams. If I want to go 0 RB, fine. He could be my RB1. If I want to go hero RB, I'll have no problems taking him as my second or third running back whenever I revisit the position, 8th, 9th round. And so I love Kamara. I think that he presents a really good value. And because everybody talking about Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller, it's like, do we not understand? Like, okay, well, Kamara misses 4 or 6 games. Like, he's going to be the dude when he comes back. Like, even if one of those guys cuts into the early down work, they're not stealing the pass game work away from him. So, again, I've been drafting him as what I perceive to be a value. And in my ranks, he's somewhere in the RB3 range. I want to say off the top of my head, I have him at RB29, RB30-ish at the moment. But I'm probably going to bump him up just a little bit.
Yeah, I needed a little clarity. I have him right in the same range, right in that 30-ish, running back 3. I think we'll find out. Like, a lot of speculation out there. I had a guy in a league where one of the guys who picked him up, immediately upon the news wrote, word on the street is he will avoid suspension. And I'm like, well, unless you live on Park Avenue, I probably don't know if I share in that view. That word is not going here. So, Agreed. I'm expecting maybe 6 games, and then he appeals it to 4 at this point. But we'll all find out soon enough. Any interest at all in some Kendre Miller shares later? I'm not in on Jamal, but I do have some shares of Miller, just thinking if it goes off.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at, I've got a little bit of Jamal Williams in best ball. If I'm going to take another guy out of this backfield, for me, it will be Kendre Miller. And a lot of this comes out to, it's just a leverage pick off of Kamara. We saw Kamara, and it's not so much the pass game, but his early down rushing metrics all tailed off last year. His missed tackles forced, explosive run rates, all of those things tanked last year. And we could say we want about the offense, but some of that with an aging running back can also be tied just to Kamara's pure talent at this point in his career. So if you're making the leverage bet, okay, maybe Kamara's cooked outside of the passing game, I think the bet that you should be making is Kendre Miller, because we know who Jamal Williams is. As swaggy as he is, he's just a guy. I mean, I don't want to offend like any Jamal Williams stands out there, but all the rushing metrics, everything else says that. He just got a boatload of touchdowns last year.
Right, you get some really fortuitous carries in good positions behind a great offensive line. In an offense that scored the 3rd most touchdowns in the NFL. I think that, might a little bit of an outlier season, people. I do, my concern with Kamara has been since Breeze has moved on, Breeze's retirement, the targets haven't been there. Breeze was hitting the running backs like 27% of this time. Didn't see that, since he left. So hopefully, we get a little more of that, or it comes around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're really hoping for. I mean, we didn't see Andy Dalton check down. It just seems like they've been doing squirrely things to try to manufacture offense with Taysom Hill and stuff. So maybe with Derek Carr, we get more of a, I'm not going to say traditional Saints offense, but maybe some of the elements that we saw when Breeze was there do come back a little bit, although it's, the jury's still out.
Running back I know you like, Tony Pollard, running back 7 on underdog at this point in time. Just slightly ahead of his finish last year, or right in that same range as his finish. What are we expecting from him in terms of workload? I know the Cowboys last year talked about it, the coaching staff, Skip Heat, threw it out there, I think, at first that, we only like him to get this many snaps. You think that could change, or do you even care if it changes?
I think it's going to change. And what's been leading me to just roll my eyes and scratch my head this entire offseason, Bob, is how many years have we said, okay, if Tony Pollard could be the guy, if Tony Pollard could get the work, man, I wish Tony Pollard, we'd be over the moon for Tony Pollard. And I feel like everybody all offseason has been like, well, what if Zeke signs back? What about the volume? And I'm screaming to high heavens. Like, I got Tony Pollard as my RB1 overall. And people now, so I will say this. Social media is coming around a little bit. I do see some articles coming out about, Tony Pollard top 3, top 5 now. And I was called totally insane a few weeks ago for having Tony Pollard as my RB1 overall. But I look at Tony Pollard, the efficiency, the opportunity, all these different things line up for him. And the other part about this is with him being a full-time back, I think his target share goes up a little bit. And he could have the pure run out of just being Austin Eckler 2.0 this year. Now, do I think that that's the most likely case? No. I mean, you can't pencil in anybody for 17 to 20 touchdowns.
Right.
But putting him as my RB1 overall, I do think that everything lines up. We see the parity year after year after year. We could go down the list of guys that running backs do not repeat usually, ever, hardly ever as the RB1 overall. So really for me, with everybody screaming at me and saying, well, you don't have CMC as your RB1, so just disregard these ranks. Okay, fine. If you want to go back in history, pretty much anybody that's going to say, okay, well, last year's RB1 is this year's RB1, I can also make a stronger case to say, well, maybe we should throw those ranks out the window because you don't see it repeat.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And so a couple of great questions in the chat. I'll get to these, JSC. One of them kind of dovetails with what I wanted to talk about anyway. So, but I did want to hit on another player. I mentioned I'm at that point in my best ball journey, kind of similar to yours this offseason so far. Jumped in February, where I'm, looking for the players, as I mentioned, that I don't have a lot of. I haven't gotten a lot of James Cook. Tell me why I should have more.
I just look at James Cook as arbitrage Jahmyr Gibbs. And I tweeted that earlier today. Twitter doesn't like it too much. But I get the differences in the draft capital. But outside of that, what are we looking at as far as differences in skill sets? We're buying into good offenses with both Gibbs and Cook. Except Cook is not a top 15, top 12 RB in drafts. He's RB 30 on Underdog right now. Much less, what are we talking about? They have big backs there, David Montgomery in Detroit. Okay, well, James Cook's dealing with the same thing in Buffalo. But the reason I want to invest in James Cook is we did see Josh Allen check down more last year. And if who's really the big target getter after Stephon Diggs? I've got all my hope in the world for Dalton Kincaid, but does he take that leap in his rookie season? Gabe Davis is not a high-end target earner. Then who else is going to get the targets? We've seen Devin Singletary, who is not even close to the same type of receiving option that James Cook is, garner targets out of the backfield. I think Cook could be an integral part of this offense this year, and I'm not telling you that he's going to have all the red zone role all to himself, but if this team trusts him, the draft capital lines up, drafted in the second round last year, the metrics line up. I mean, he had almost 2.9 yards after contact per attempt last year. He was first in breakaway run rate. So we know the explosive ability is there. All he needs is snaps to sit here and for us to see what he can do. And at the price point he is in drafts, yeah, I think he fits a lot of different team builds. Whether you're going 0 RB, you're going RB in the first 2 rounds, you could still get James Cook, depending on where he falls. He's going somewhere in the hundreds, like the early part or what is that, the later part of the 8th round, early part of the 9th round. Yep. So at that point, yeah, taking the upside shot versus the other guys on the board, oh, yeah, you better believe it, baby.
Yeah, you mentioned he's running back 30 on Underdog, 94 ADP. Damien Harris had been cheaper. People are starting to talk themselves into him being the thing. He's moved up to running back 38. I have shares of him when he was, down in the 40s, closer to 50. Those days are over. So now it'll be Latavius Murray time. For down at the very bottom.
Woo. That's a rough time, Bob. That's like dealing with food poisoning if it's Latavius Murray time.
I'm old and mean and cheap, Derek. As long as I'm paying the least amount.
Same. You just described me to a T.
I think that's interesting stuff. I want to get to start getting some questions here. I see you out there in the chat, so appreciate you coming in. How would you rank the duos of Mahomes and Kelce, Hurts and Brown, and Allen and Diggs, first to worst?
Oh, I think I'm going to put him just in that exact order, Bob. I mean, Mahomes is basically everything proof. He's basically going to be a top 5 quarterback. Doesn't matter if he's throwing to practice squad dummies out there like MVS. Doesn't matter at all. Right. And Kelce, we know, is league-winning difference maker. And for Hurts and Brown, I just look at A.J. Brown. Like, for everything we talk about the Eagles' offense, there is still meat on the bone for Jalen Hurts to take another step forward as a passer. And not from an efficiency standpoint, but from a volume standpoint. The Eagles were basically a team of two halves last year. It was like, in the first half, we run fast, we pass the ball a lot. And the second half, usually we're beating the brakes off of everybody on a weekly basis, and we just decide to slow it down and we run the ball. They have a harder schedule this year. So we could see more Eagle passing in the second half of games. And what that means is, as good as we saw Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert last year, they could be even better this year if they decide to pass more because the games are closer. So they're going to take the second spot, and this is not me hating on Allen and Diggs, but I don't know what's going on in Buffalo. Diggs does not seem too happy. We're getting some former shades of how his interesting exit from Minnesota went. I'm not saying that Diggs is not going to be in Buffalo this year, so everybody out there, don't hear what I'm not saying. But with Stephon Diggs, he is getting a little bit closer to the age cliff. We saw some of his efficiency metrics not dip. But the other thing, I don't want to bury the lead here, the difference in Stephon Diggs and what he did in the first half of last year versus the second half of last year was very, very different. All of his metrics just dropped. And I'm not telling you off of a table, but they did drop to where you're like, oh, he's a locked-in first-round wide receiver. To if you looked at just the second half of last year, you'd be like, well, I don't know if I want to make that bet. So I find myself drafting a lot of other wide receivers, not named Stephon Diggs. So they're going to come in a third for me.
I think like most of the drafts I've been in, if you take Travis Kelce, inside the first 6 picks, which I have done many times, you almost have to take Mahomes in round 2, the way it's working out. Yeah. And I do think I would rank them. I think the Hurts Brown, Allen Diggs is a little closer than the Mahomes Kelce for the reason that Kelce gives you such leverage over the field. It was insane. It's insane, right? I mean, you're looking at a player and a half advantage. And I mean, just like in DFS, you need to win the positional battles each week. Travis Kelce lets you do that. There are running backs that let you do that if they are on the field. One of them is Christian McCaffrey. I know you like Pollard ahead of him. What are your thoughts on the San Francisco offense? Are we assuming Brock Purdy is going to be there? The mini Shanahan, the factotum Shanahan is going to be running this offense on the field?
I mean, let's not sit here and take too many risks. Let's check down, let the playmakers do what they can and they will. That's basically Brock Purdy in a nutshell, man. So I think Purdy, like everything out of 49ers camp has all said, as soon as Purdy can throw the ball, he's the quarterback. And I don't think that, even if Trey Lance comes out and he balls out this camp, I don't think that like it really gives him a legitimate shot at taking the starting job away from Brock Purdy, assuming Brock Purdy is healthy. I think at this point, really, that just helps his trade value. And maybe he gets moved week 1 with them also having Sam Darnold to play the backup role. So, I mean, for San Francisco, I think it's Purdy as long as he's healthy. And all the parts and pieces of this offense, man, yeah, like I was all in on CMC last year, and everybody's out there saying, well, he's injured, he can't stay healthy. And I was pro CMC. Like, I had him as my RB1 last year. I'm pushing back against all the injury narratives. He goes out there and he does what CMC does. And this year, yeah, people don't want to hear it, but I don't have him as a top 3 running back this year. And people hate that, like I talked about, because they want their chalk rankings. They want CMC at 1. And the thing about it is I feel like we're glossing over the fact that CMC with Elijah Mitchell was there and healthy. He ate into CMC's role, not in the passing game, but really where it counts in the red zone. So when they were both active last year, Elijah Mitchell had a higher percentage of the red zone carries than Christian McCaffrey. And I don't think we could just easily dismiss that because San Francisco does not have, okay, we need to sit here and win weeks 1 through 5. They have Super Bowl aspirations. So to get there, yes, they need a healthy quarterback. They also need Christian McCaffrey to be pumping along and just being Christian McCaffrey for the entire season. How do you do that? You take a little bit off of his plate and you say, I don't care if you go out and get 25 touches in week 5. What I want is that you're there for us in the playoffs. And so I think Elijah Mitchell is going to play a larger role in this backfield than anybody drafting CMC wants to see on the field this year. So I don't hate Christian McCaffrey. I have my ranks, and I have Christian McCaffrey obviously lower than consensus because I'll take my shots on Tony Pollard. I'll take my shots on Bijan Robinson. I'll take Austin Eckler. I'll take all these different guys ahead of Christian McCaffrey. So it's not so much I hate, but like, what do you think about that, Bob? Like, where do you sit with McCaffrey? Do you think Mitchell is just not going to get any work, or are you worried about him a little bit?
No, I think it's totally defensible. I think the offense got so much better when McCaffrey was there. I think they're going to lean on him. He has the three down skill set. I'll still probably, this is a year where I've been splitting it up, right? So, if I have the first overall pick, I'm not picking the same guy first overall every damn draft because that didn't work out well last year, says everyone who drafted Jonathan Taylor. So I do have him in the mix there. He's in my rotation, but he's not a locked in constant. So, and out in the chat, Dame Overboard loves the contrarian take on CMC, and I do too. I mean, I love this, Mr. Scampers. How are you, Pigbird Jet fan? Going back to Diggs. Just mentioned, was Diggs bad in the second half last year because Allen was playing hurt? Well, Emo sent me something from the site here just to emphasize what Derek said, if you weren't aware. Over the last 8 weeks of the season, Diggs fell off to a wide receiver 14. Over the last 6 weeks, wide receiver 20. Right? So, I mean, that's a significant drop. Royal Slade out there saying Pollard's going too high for him. Derek will say, no, sir. No, he's not. Do you think that was related to Allen a little bit?
I think it could be related to Allen, but it's not only just the fantasy scoring. Like when I looked at, and I just pulled up my little blurb on Diggs from earlier this offseason, and if you look at what he did in the first 6 games, he had 6 100-yard receiving games over the first 9 weeks. He had a 29% target share, and what we saw him do over the final 7 weeks, he only had 100 yards receiving game. His target share dropped to 25%. His yards per route run dropped from 2.88, which is elite, to 1.95, which is really good still. Like, that's borderline wide receiver 1. But again, like, and you know as well as I do, Bob, like doing all these best ball drafts, especially on Underdog and other formats, wide receivers are all the creme de la creme. They are the chef's kiss this year. Everybody wants wide receivers. So to me, if we're saying, okay, everybody is drafting wide receivers aggressively this year, maybe we need to be kind of picky or a little bit pickier in years previous to the wide receivers that we're going to say, okay, in these early rounds, this is who I'm pushing my chips to the middle on. And for a wide receiver like Diggs, who, yes, like we're talking about, could we put a little bit of this on Allen? Possibly. But the other part about this, we didn't see his target share stay consistent. We didn't see his efficiency stay consistent. And you talk about the fantasy drop-off. So we could put a little bit of that on Allen. The other part of this is maybe some of that needs to be put on Stephon Diggs and lay that at his feet. So if we're being picky about these early round wide receivers, there's guys where I can't poke any holes in their narratives. Like Tyreek Hill, can't poke any holes in that guy. Cooper Kupp, if as long as he's healthy and Matthew Stafford plays, he's doing Cooper Kupp things. So it's like the other guys that are going in that first round range, I feel a lot better about their profiles and their outlooks than maybe Stephon Diggs.
I do too. I think he had Devontae Adams for the obvious reason, some concerns about that offense or to change the quarterback. But I'm probably still taking Adams a fair amount, and I'm kind of swerving around Diggs a little more. Something you said, like he's going to be playing in Buffalo, but the disgruntled factor is hard for me to overlook, especially when you give his exit from Minnesota was because he was disgruntled. So I'm not gonna, spite my, cut off my nose to spite my face here. If I'm in the right spot and I get him at the right price, I'm still taking Stephon Diggs, but I'm not like actively pursuing him in that first round. I'm probably taking some other paths at that point. a question I think I asked came after you mentioned, but you have Bijan ahead of Christian McCaffrey. Make that case for us.
I look at where I have red zone concerns about CMC. I don't have any red zone concerns about Bijan Robinson. We're talking about he's getting airdropped into an Atlanta Falcons offense and we could tell you all the things we want to about Arthur Smith and Desmond Ridder and things like that. When Atlanta gets in close, they were first in red zone rushing rate in the NFL. Now, maybe if the QB situation improves a little bit, maybe they pass a tiny bit more. I still think they're going to be in that top 3. You do not take Bijan Robinson top 10 in the NFL draft to have him spelled or do any kind of goofiness with Desmond Ridder, Tyler Algier, Cordell Patterson at the goal line. Like, Bijan is going to be the dude. And the other part about this, Bob, is like, we make the jokes about, okay, well, who else is Atlanta going to throw the ball to outside of Kyle Pitts and Drake London? Oh, wait, it's Bijan Robinson. Like, literally, this target tree is, there's 3 guys, man. Like, Bijan could easily get 80 to 90 targets in his rookie season. Because, yes, we could talk about, okay, well, Desmond Ridder is supposedly a mobile quarterback. We saw that in college. We did not see that in the NFL. That man only had 1 start last year out, I think of his 4 or 5 starts that he made, where he surpassed 10 rushing yards. So for all the people talking about Desmond Ridder's mobile, we hadn't seen that in the NFL. So if he's not going to run, he's going to check down. And the fact that there are not many other options in this offense, like there's no other person, like a third receiving option that's going to get more targets than Bijan Robinson. So he could literally like end up not only top 5 in rushing attempts amongst running backs, but top 5 in targets as well.
We have seen a unique piece in that offense. Arthur Smith make use of Cordell Patterson 2 years ago, his big season, 69 targets. I don't know Cordell Patterson, for as great a player as he is, he has a narrow set of skills, both as a runner and receiver, right? I mean, not an expansive ability, but still, Arthur Smith was able to cobble something together. We've been hearing for I don't know how long what a great offensive mind Arthur Smith is, and I would point to his usage of Cordell Patterson, getting more out of him than any other coach, and he's had some good coaches, as a sign that that's true. Are we not at the point where there's enough great pieces that it all comes together? I think, like the quarterback remains the big question for me, but you got the offensive line, you have the tight end, you have that alpha wide receiver, and now you have Bijan. So I'm wondering if this isn't the year that he twists up that Rubik's Cube of talent into something that makes a little more sense than what it has the last couple of years, especially with that offensive line. So,
I mean, absolutely. And the other thing I'll point out here too, Bob, is that for all of our worries about like these run-heavy offenses like the Chicago Bears and the Atlanta Falcons, they were historically run-heavy. So even asking them to repeat being historically run-heavy, you also, I mean, like we should all be making the bet that type of historic offensive situation doesn't repeat. They are going to throw. We talk about regression so much. We also need to bake in regression about like, well, if you ran the ball at a historic rate last year, is that really going to happen 2 years in a row? It's more doubtful.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And in case you're just tuning in, as many of you have been tuning in over the course of the program, this is Derek Brown, Fantasy Pros. You follow him on Twitter at @dbro_FFB, and you all probably do. And based on some of the comments in the chats, many people familiar with your work. Pigbar Jet fan would like to know, will you be wearing any stickers after this pod? So clearly,
Pigbird, I love Pigbird. Pigbird is always in the comments on the daily, on the social. Love that he's tuning into this. I have not had any stickers. Now, I will say my daughters did ransack me this morning and hit me with the makeup again before my little one got out to daycare. Dude, I just got off the nail polish just yesterday. It was chipping off. Like, I'm eating things for dinner, and I'm like, oh, there's glitter. So I had to take it all off, but I'm sure by the end of the week, I'll end up with it probably for the live draft. I'll walk in there, and people will be like, oh, you must be Derek. You're the guy who's got glitter, and you got all the nail polish on you. Yep, that's me.
Oh, looking forward to all this. By the way, Fantasy Pros, great site. Love all, you've seen all the people here on this very live stream. Pat Fitzmaurice, Joe Pisapia, from the Fantasy Black Book as well. So great group of people. Eric Andrews, I should mention as well. Love everybody there and all the work you do. So there was a question earlier that I wanted to use to pivot off to something I like to talk about here. JSC wanted to know, what might you do differently this year during your drafts than you've ever done before?
Whew. I will say this year I'm much more into going with a premium tight end. And because I think that we are seeing a divide in those, and I think this year is an especially, I'm not going to say unique case, but I think that there is an even larger divide of what we could see versus like the elite tight ends versus, you know, that entire scrum of middle round tight ends and the Pat Freiermuths and the Evan Ingrams and things like that. Like, to me, tight end feels like it's a much more, I'm not going to say a solved game, but I feel like the way to attack the position just seems so much more clearer to me this year than maybe in previous seasons, where it's like, yeah, like if you look at my ranks on Fantasy Pros, like I've got Travis Kelce as my third overall player, because I think you could start making a case for him as soon as the 103. Like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson go, okay, well, fine. You want Travis Kelce time? Let's go Travis Kelce time. And if I'm not going with Travis Kelce, the other elites at this position, and it's reflected in my ranks, I will probably be drafting when we enter week 1, and I'll look back at all my best ball exposures. Probably my 3 highest rostered tight ends outside of taking late shots on Jelani Woods will be Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Darren Waller. And those are the 3 guys that I look at being in their own tier, Bob. Like, how many other guys, Bob, that like we can look in our mind's eye and say, okay, if everything goes right, they can get 130, 140 targets this year. To me, that's the short list. It's those 3 guys, and then there's everybody else. So, like, the way that I'm approaching tight end, I'm paying up for tight end more in my drafts, because I feel like the way that the fantasy landscape is lining up is that there are really good values at wide receiver later, a la Keenan Allen, a la Deontay Johnson, where I don't feel bad about it, and I'm loving my teams when I go Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, or I wait and I take Darren Waller.
That's been the main one. Like, I've gone as high as 101 on Kelce. Not gonna lie, I've done it.
I've done it.
The regular, right? If you want him, that's where you're going. If you want him and you have the 101, that's the only place you'll get him. And so as we're talking here, and I know not everyone in the chat does this, but many in the chat do. You know, we're in a lot of leagues. We have the luxury of, you know, spreading it out and moving it around. If you're in a single league, though, I mean, making the argument for Kelce may be a little harder, but it's certainly not impossible to me at all. I think I can make that argument that it's just the leverage over the field argument. You mentioned Waller, who I agree. I mean, so at some point you're looking for a guy who can be that team's wide receiver 1, essentially, right? Yep. And Kelce is there. For sure, Mark Andrews is there. For sure, Waller is there. What if he wanted a discount version of that, like a super discount version of that? Would his name be Mike Gesicki?
It's possible Mike Gesicki. Like, I'm not going to rule him out leading the Patriots in targets. I guess the only worry about Gesicki that I come back to would be, does he play enough in 12 personnel, and how much does New England utilize that this year? That's my only real big worry about Mike Gesicki. I'll throw one back at you, Bob. Could you see David Njoku being the discount version of that guy, where we walk out and David Njoku has 120 plus targets this year? I think it's possible.
It's not. It is. It's definitely possible. I think it's slightly more possible for Gesicki just for the lack of like Juju.
No, agreed.
All due respect is, you know, if he's the high end of that receiving core, you know, and they start getting tricky again, and Bill O'Brien pulls out some of the old Patriot playbooks, we'll see a very busy Gesicki. Look, you know, you're getting him for free essentially, so go ahead and knock yourself out. And I think there's a bunch of tight ends. I have shares of Cole Turner, so what the hell do I know?
I don't want to hijack the show here, Bob, but the one guy that I mentioned, and I want to get your take on it, because I feel like I'm kind of, we're all in our silos right now. We're prepping for the season, and those guys we love. I'm over the moon on Jelani Woods. I think, like, with the athleticism, outside of Michael Pittman, what are we talking about for pass catchers? Alec Pierce, that's who we're worried about. Isaiah McKenzie, Josh Downs, who's a rookie, and we don't even know how much 11 personnel they're going to run. I look at if you're talking about like the outlier of outlier, a guy that literally is free in drafts and could lead his team in targets, which, I mean, Michael Pittman, maybe you're looking at 100, 110 targets. So I know that's a big ask, but is it doable? What are your thoughts on Jelani Woods? Because I love him this year as a late round guy. Like, I think that everybody's approaching the Colts like Frank Reich is still there. And I'm like, he's not. They're going to use one guy. That's what Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter have done. But you tell me, what do you think about Jelani?
I think he is another guy that I am investing in that same range. I mean, look, you can take shots on these guys because they're essentially freebies or, free score plays. You're getting them in the double-digit rounds. But Woods, I think, is an overlooked commodity for exactly the reasons you said. So I'm on board with that one. There's a handful of guys. I mean, and somebody in Washington is going to fare well. It's if they bring over this Kansas City-style offense. This guy, Travis Kelce's been really good in that. I wonder if they won't find someone to do that role. You talk to the local beat writers. I'm getting some shares of Logan Thomas. I just drafted one today. But the locals are keen on Cole Turner. So, as is Matt Waldman. So, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think that's a little bit reachy. I'm not out here recommending everyone run out and grab him. It's not a lot of evidence to work on. But if you're just out there throwing last round darts at players, why not? So, and
absolutely,
that's kind of where we're at in the best ball season. Jimmy Williams wants to know, by the way, Big Bird Jetpack wants to know if he does the same hairdo as we do, if he will have great fantasy success. I can tell you that is the case. It is the shaved head.
Yes, it is. It comes down to luck, Big Bird. Okay. What you do every Sunday is you get up, you get your caffeine intake of choice, coffee, or you go with the good old Red Bulls, whatever, caffeine pills. I don't care, and then you sit down before kickoff and you just ever so slightly just stroke the dome a little bit as you set all the lineups, and it just gives the good juju, man. Like, it's like rubbing it for good luck, so yes, totally, you will go undefeated in all your leagues.
Jim Furry wants to know, what about Kittle? I think we hit on this. He might have missed this, but I think in general, like, you could make the argument. I've talked about this with John Law here on this live stream as well. I mean, like the value of the 49ers offense is probably the quarterback, just because there's a number of pieces, right? And I do think Kittle was great with Purdy, and I'm optimistic, but it just seems like there's enough pieces there that I'm a little concerned.
I'm out on Kittle. I wrote him up earlier this week for Fantasy Pros, and everything on George Kittle just screams to me that, one, it's regression. Like, I remember a time and place not too long ago, Bob, where we were like, is George Kittle ever going to score touchdowns? And then he comes out here and he spikes 11 touchdowns, and everybody's like, oh, what about George Kittle? And I'm like, well, I could tell you the 11 touchdowns. I doubt that's coming back. But, like, if you look at his touchdown scoring over the previous parts of his career, he's a 5 or 6 touchdown guy usually. And I don't think that Brock Purdy is what elevated him to scoring double digits. I just think it's the flukiness of touchdowns. But the other parts and pieces of George Kittle, his PFF receiving grade dropped last year, and it was still very good, but it was lower. His yards per route run dropped, and for a guy that's dealt with injuries, and he's getting a little bit longer in the tooth. I don't see a reason for me to sit here and draft George Kittle not high. Like, I've got him as tight end 7 right now, just in that same tier with Hockenson, Pitts, Goddard, and Njoku, because I don't think that, like, even in the best case of scenarios, can we really definitively craft, like, this argument of George Kittle getting any more than maybe 90 targets this year in that offense? It's hard, man. And, like, with that type of volume constraints, I'll go other places in drafts.
Right. I think Hockenson has a better shot at that target share just because Minnesota throws the ball a hell of a lot more, but also he's going to have to battle now, 3 guys. I mean, we saw it last year. He had close to 90, 85, 86 targets, I think, last year, but still behind, came in late, but behind Osbourn. Osbourn had 90. Thielen had over 100. Justin Jefferson had quite a few, I believe. So but that's why I'm fine drafting Hockenson, but I think that's the reason. I'm looking at some of these other tight ends, the ones that we've talked about, more for that reason. JSC, his favorite underrated duo in the NFL currently is Trevor Laurence and Calvin Ridley. Do you think, Derek, that Calvin Ridley will come in and put up wide receiver 1 numbers right off the get-go?
Oh, I absolutely do, Bob. I've got Calvin Ridley Some might say I've got him ranked aggressively. I mean, I'd say aggressive, but I mean, pretty much consensus is kind of aggressive on him. I've got him at wide receiver 13. I look at Calvin Ridley as this year's discount version of Stephon Diggs. And I know I just threw a lot of shade at Stephon Diggs, but I think that there's an easy path for Calvin Ridley to walk out of this season with 90 to 100 receptions and really just prove that he's still that guy. I get the layoff, and I understand people are worried about that, but I'm old enough to remember when we were worried about Jamar Chase forgetting how to catch footballs and worried about catching footballs with lines because he hadn't played in a year. It's craziness. Like every video I've seen about a Calvin Ridley, he doesn't look any slower than we've ever seen, and I'm perfectly fine and willing to invest. I love that call. I love Laurence and Ridley this year.
Right. But by the way, the chat, Royal Slade, Kittle is good for him as long as Purdy plays. I prefer it if Purdy plays totally, but I'm kind of swerving around him for the reason. Also, one other reason is he's such a good blocker. I mean, I think that's a limiting factor for him that they'll keep him in sometimes. So, not against him, but I think I'm finding different paths at that point. And I do have Waller well ahead of him just for that wide receiver one cachet. Pigbird wants to know in the Scott Fishbowl. And we haven't talked a lot of Scott Fishbowl strategy because I don't think either of us actually has one.
Nope. Team no prep, baby. No prep, no mocks, Bob. That's where I'm at.
I have done some mocks, and I did really well in most of the mocks until I got to like a final mock where I was absolutely destroyed, and I realized the futility of this exercise. You have no idea what's going to happen until you're in your real draft, right? But so Pigbird's drafting from 10, no shot at Kelce, obviously. But is that a reasonable spot? And I've seen this done. Would you take Andrews and Waller, go Super Bully tight end with those first two picks?
I have no problem with that. And the way that you have to look at it, and I would say the way that I approached, and I'm not going to tell anybody that it worked out this way, but I think that the logic is sound in that if you just compare this to like a large field DFS tournament or best ball, whatever, we know that, your win rates just based off of where you draft in the first round fall off a map after about pick 6, pick 7, what have you. And so for the way that I look at it is, if I was drafting, and this year Fishbowl, I'm drafting on the 105, but the two previous years, I was drafting, I think, at the 110, 111. I was at the back end of the first round. And the way that I'll look at it is you have to leverage the field, you have to be different, and you're essentially trying to play catch up. And so what I tried to accomplish at that point, and I think that, talk about what Pigbird wants to do, I think is perfectly viable. You want a different build from the field. And I'm not just saying you just throw things against the wall, but you lean into the format. And if Waller and Andrews come out here and let's not say that, and this is the biggest pro Andrews and Waller case that I can make. If they get close to Travis Kelce in this format, and Waller, from a lot of places I've seen, he's going in the 5th round of Scott Fishbowl, 6th round of Scott Fishbowl drafts. Can you imagine, like, if he gets close to matching Travis Kelce in this scoring format in fantasy this year, just what that type of leverage can do, because you basically got Travis Kelce in the 6th round versus having to draft him in the 1st round. So if you went other ways and you got that type of production from the tight end position, much less bully tight end, and you nailed all the other wide receivers, quarterbacks, whoever you take outside of taking Travis Kelce in the 1st round, like that's how you win big formatted tournaments or large field stuff like this. You have to be different than the rest of the field. And I think some people, like, if it's their first year in Scott Fishbowl, it's kind of like, oh, geez, do I really go off the beaten path? Forget all of that. Toss it out the window. Like, draft players you like and leverage the field. And if you're right, you win.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. And it's funny. I drafted in LA last year, and I'll name drop here as Tom Everett Scott was, talking about his draft, and he landed. He had landed Rodgers relatively early, but also grabbed Alan Lazard like in round 10 or 11, and we didn't know yet what Christian Watson would be. He was hurt at the time. I just said to him, that's a league winning kind of play. It didn't turn out to be a league winner, but what you need is that guy that you're getting cheap or getting off schedule that's going to come up and provide you, starting value at a position where you don't expect it. You're going to have to identify some of those guys, or guys that are going to come up. And, we were talking a little bit before and talked about, maybe you wanted to go Lamar Jackson early. I think that's the quarterback who has the ability to be the quarterback 1 overall, right? That you don't have to draft as a quarterback overall. Those are some of the moves you're going to have to make. And if that's the case, who are some of the players you're looking at that are maybe a little bit off schedule that you feel like are going to come through and maybe you're going to deliver that super high end? Who's coming out of nowhere to shock us this season? I know predicting the future is tricky business, Derek, so I'm not going to hold you. But yes, I am.
Hey, look, I'm fine with it, Bob. I mean, look, we're all tossing out our predictions here, man. If anybody's been following my Twitter feed for long enough, they have no problem. Obviously, I have no problem being different from consensus. And this is not just trying to be different, but when process leads me that way, I don't have a problem with pushing back against all of Twitter and saying, you know what, whatever, it's fine. I'm cool with being different on it. And I think if you're just starting from the quarterback situation, Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson are probably the two guys that I think have that top 5 upside that I'm willing to swing on this year. We know both of them have the rushing equity. All I'm asking for Anthony Richardson is to do something similar to what Jalen Hurts did in his first year as a starter, and that propelled Jalen Hurts to QB6 in fantasy points per game. Daniel Jones got the upgrade in weapons. We've talked about Waller ad nauseum already. If the passing goes up for him, we know the rushing is there. He could be a top 5 quarterback, and he was QB 10 last year. So those are the two quarterbacks that I think could come out of nowhere and be top 5 this year. Running back wise, I love J.K. Dobbins this year. I think that he could be a top 5, top 8 guy. Because everybody, again, we're talking about people, the way that people are avoiding, or not avoiding, but the way they're treating Jelani Woods as far as previous usage. People are looking at J.K. Dobbins as the running back version of that and saying that, well, Greg Roman was there. It's going to get split up 3 different ways. And it's like, not if you look at what Todd Monken's done. He's not done that. He fed top 10 opportunity shares to, yes, Nick Chubb was one of those, but also in one of his final stops at OC before arriving in Baltimore was freaking Peyton Barber, who is the replaceable of all replaceable running backs. J.K. Dobbins, when he's healthy, is one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. So we're looking at a guy that's being drafted as an RB2, as a lot of times a low-end RB2 to mid, who I think could be a strong, if not maybe top 5 running back this year. J.K. Dobbins is a name I want to bring up here. Dameon Pierce is another one, because I think that Dameon Pierce could get all of the volume in Houston. Like Devin Singletary could just be a breather back. I think Houston's obviously going to field a better offense this year. So I think we've seen the efficiency out of Dameon Pierce. All we need is health to comply and for the offense to be a little bit better. With C.J. Stroud, I think that's definitely going to happen. I think I'll throw an overarching one here, Bob. I want a lot of different parts or pieces of the Denver Broncos passing attack, because as bad as Russ was last year, if you look at the things that Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy can control, and basically I'm gonna whittle this down to how often they get open. They're still elite options at getting open. And something I've integrated more into my process this offseason and going back to even last year with the primer was ESPN's open scores. Both of these guys are top 10. Jerry Jeudy is 5th over the last 2 years in open score, and Cortland Sutton is tied with CeeDee Lamb for 12th. What that screams to me is if Russell Wilson doesn't look like he is a shadow of his former self this year, both of those guys, I put it in a bold predictions article because apparently this is bold right now, that both of them are top 30 wide receivers this year. And maybe I could have gone bolder and said both of them are top 24, but people are leaving Cortland Sutton as a wide receiver 4 and left for dead. He cannot get better than he was last year. So I think Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are two really easy names. If we wanted to go the rookie route, I'm all in on Quentin Johnston. Again, buying into the Chargers offense, who Justin Herbert's probably going to lead the league in passing attempts this year. So I'm totally in on that. We talked about the tight end position, but outside of Jelani Woods, again, I'm just going to buy into good offenses. I'm going to take swings on Gerald Everett. And I know we don't see it very often, Bob, but again, going back to Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid could just be that guy, man. Like he is a legit like top end talent. I've said it, and people think it's just insane hyperbole, but Josh Allen could have just gotten his Travis Kelce. I mean, everything. I remember when I was watching his film, like back like before the NFL draft, Bob, and I remember I just texted my colleague and buddy in arms, Thor Nystrom, when I was watching Dalton Kincaid, and I was like, Thor, tell me I'm crazy, but dear Lord, I see Travis Kelce when I'm watching his tape. And then of course I open the old Bird app, and I see Matt Wallman say something about Dalton Kincaid and Travis Kelce in the same sentence, and I was like, okay, I'm not crazy, baby, let's go. So going off the beaten path, those are the names for me this year.
Yeah. Wallman has expounded on Dalton Kincaid here on this very live stream, and he thinks late in the season you could have a league-winning type player as things progress.
Love it.
And I'm just going to go back, and I love your Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton take so much. I'm going to not call you out for your Tim Patrick slander, which is usually not allowed on this channel.
I will be very, very sad if you do not take Tim Patrick in the 5th round of our draft this Saturday, Bob. I'm just going to hold you to that, okay?
Fair enough. Scooby Taylor with a question out here. He's in a dynasty league. He's pick at 205 is up right now. He's stacked at quarterback and wide receiver, has Kittle, but no one behind him. He's at 205. Should he grab Sam Laporta or Zach Charbonnet?
Oh, I'm taking Laporta.
I think that way he asked the question, like it sets up the answer, but I agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in on Sammy Ballgame. I've taken him as early as like the 111 or 112 in Dynasty rookie drafts. So him falling into the 2nd round, and I know we didn't whether or not this is tight end premium. I imagine if it was tight end premium, we probably would have mentioned that in the question. Yeah. But this is all to say, like, after those 1st round wide receivers come off the board, it's Dalton Kincaid, it's Sam Laporta season, and the way that I'll look at both of those guys, and I'm not just saying like I'm cherry picking this, Bob, but I think that we have to look at player archetypes, we have to look at efficiency, we have to look at it, and for all of these different things, we have to plant our flags on certain things. Those are 2 players in Dynasty right now that I will not move off of, that I think that they have elite upside at the position. And my ranks in Dynasty absolutely follow that. Like right now, and I brace yourselves, people watching this, but like I have Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta as my tight end 5 and 6 in Dynasty.
That's, I mean, it's defensible. By the way, and I think I'm going to think back. And every Dynasty startup that I've done, or every rookie Dynasty draft I've done, I've ended up with Sam Laporta. Every single one.
Yeah, love him.
Would be about 8 of them. And I'm with it. Hello, Albert. Thanks for coming in. Hello, Dynasty Hot Sauce Pod. Appreciate you coming. JSC had one more question along the quarterback receiver duo. We were talking about Laurence and Ridley. Would you prefer that duo or Fields and Moore? DJ Moore.
I think just straight up looking at the combo and the ceiling aspect of it, I probably would go with Laurence and Ridley. And this is not shade on DJM. I think that Fields has top 3, top 5 upside at the quarterback position. I think that DJ Moore, he is going to have to thread the needle this year unless Chicago comes out and they throw the ball a lot more. And I mean a lot more, which could happen. But I think just looking from a median volume perspective, much less like even the high-end part of that, I'll go with Laurence and Ridley.
Yeah, I think I would too if that's the duo. I mean, I love Justin Fields for you.
And I love Justin Fields. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think he could be this year's Jalen Hurts, and that I know that sounds like, well, why the heck am I not siding with that? But Trevor Laurence was producing at a top 3 level in fantasy and in real life NFL standards last year. So seeing him expand upon that even further this year and becoming like, I mean, a 40 touchdown passing guy this year, I don't think is out of the range of outcomes. If he does that, he's probably going to be top 5, top 4 this year as well.
I agree. I feel like the argument for me would be the Jaguars' offense is a little more ascendant than the Bears at this point. It just is, right? I mean, everything I think about Justin Fields is fantastic, but the offense in general, even with Cam Robinson suspended for a little while. We've got a few more minutes here with Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. It's been a great discussion. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I hope you have as well. If you have any more questions, get them in the chat, and I'll get them to him. Something that I've been doing this year, or that's been on my mind when I've been drafting, is looking back at last year, the mistakes I made and trying to correct those. I felt like I put too much emphasis on quarterback situations that I thought weren't ideal in terms of how I drafted the wide receivers, which meant I didn't get a lot of EK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. It meant I didn't get a lot of Amari Cooper. I think this year there are some players maybe in similar circumstances. I think the Tampa Bay wide receivers are going incredibly late. And I mean, so I guess the question is, it's not an ideal quarterback, but it's still a quarterback, right? Should we not be paying a little more attention? I think Terry McLaurin is dealing with that same issue right now. He's going a little later than maybe his consistent production suggests. I think I have a handful of guys that maybe that are viewed in passing offenses. Maybe Treylon Burks in that same camp. How do you feel about that approach, or just that notion that maybe we're overplaying in our mind? Because look, we take something that's not positive and we blow it totally negative, right? And when maybe it's not totally negative.
No, I don't disagree at all, Bob. I think like looking at those guys, I think that playing the range of outcomes and saying, because we all swung and missed, myself included, on two big things last year. And I think if we're looking at just the short list of things that as a consensus, as an industry, we were all behind basically, outside of maybe small inklings of pockets of the fantasy industry, everybody was out on the Seattle offense last year, because not only were we like, because I remember like we didn't even know if we liked Kenneth Walker in the sense of like, well, Rashad Penny's there. And I know he got hurt and it cleared that up, but we thought Geno Smith was going to suck. And the other parts of like, these other offenses. So like looking at that this year, yeah, I mean, we need to look at the range of outcomes. Like, what if Sam Howell is good? What if Sam Howell stinks, but Jacoby Brissett plays really well like he did last year? Yep. Both of those things are elevating factors for Terry McLaurin. Eric Bieniemy is still a question mark in my mind. But again, some of that we need to embrace the volatility of certain situations and saying, what if this goes right? Like, it's not just, okay, well, this is definitely wrong. Like, I'm not a Kyle Trask believer, but I have taken Trask in some best ball drafts. I picked him up in a dynasty league. He was floating out there the other day in a super flex league. And I'm like, Baker Mayfield sucks. Like, what if Kyle Trask just beats him out for the job? Okay, then this guy should not be hanging out on the waiver wire in any dynasty league. I think that looking at the volatility of both of those situations, much less, I'll bring up two different situations here, Bob, for players that I think that I have ranked above consensus for, but I don't think that like we're fully baking in the range of outcomes for. And JSN is not going late in drafts. I'm not going to tell people that, but everybody's treating JSN like, okay, well, he's going to be it's going to be just this muddled mess of targets with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Like, what if JSN is really that dude in his rookie season? And he comes out here and he's the wide receiver 2 on the team right behind DK, or he's pushing DK for the team lead in targets, or hell, he pulls away from these guys because he's just that guy. Like, I think that's possible. And also bringing up Quentin Johnston. We're looking at both of these guys like we know exactly how that's going to play out this season. But we're not baking in, and I don't think consensus is baking into the upside narratives of those guys. Like, we talk about, and everybody's out there like, well, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams can't stay healthy. Well, then why the hell are you ranking Quentin Johnston as a wide receiver 4? You should be above consensus. If you don't believe in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to stay healthy, you should be all in on Quentin Johnston and maybe even like float this down to Gerald Everett. But the same thing can be said for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf get an injury, you're looking at JSN as maybe a wide receiver 1. Maybe he's a wide receiver 2. And people are drafting both of these guys as wide receiver 3s and 4s. So I think we're looking at the range of outcomes for guys, not only just looking at those the different offenses, talking about like Washington and such, but as far as these players, we need to get off of looking at it like we definitively know how the targets are going to sift out in those two different offenses.
Current underdog ADP has Jackson Smith and Jigba going one pick ahead of one Tyler Lockett. So the world is is on that. I think maybe a little more assertive than I would be, a little more aggressive than I would be, but it is true. We've got to work on those outcomes. And there is a world like where Quentin Johnston shows up. Guy is a monster, man. The eyeball test. Every time I think about looking at him, he looks like a monster. Had a couple quick questions here before we wrap this up. Just Jimmy Williams had both of these questions. Who is the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in Green Bay, and can they be relevant this year? So I'm drafting a lot of Romeo Doubs because he's dirt cheap and we just don't know. There has been positive reporting on him. Do you have any favorites there or anyone you're interested in beyond Christian Watson?
I'll go off the beaten path here, and I'll say Aaron Jones just to be a little bit cheeky. But I think that he is undervalued. There is nothing that showed a drop off for Aaron Jones. Like, he should be valued exactly how he's been valued in previous years, but because of the Jordan Love stink, because people are not in on the Packers offense, he's not valued that way. If I'll go with the traditional answer of just picking a wide receiver, I'm in on J.Reed for similar reasons why you're on Romeo Doubs. I just believe that I believe in the prospect profile of J.Reed more than Romeo Doubs. Now, what could hurt J.Reed is he going to be the guy to play in 2 wide receiver sets? I don't know that, but I'm willing to take shots because, like you're talking about, him and Doubs are they're at the end of drafts. They're just left for dead. They're free.
Right.
So I'll take shots on both of them. But if I got to pick one of them, I am a little bit more in the J.Reed camp than I am the Romeo Doubs.
And I will continue to argue that it's entirely possible that Jordan Love is better than we think he is because the Packers certainly think he's something. Jimmy Williams, one last one here. What are you seeing with the Vikings wide receiver 2 situation? Is it Jordan Addison? He says Osbourn isn't going anywhere and Addison is dinged right now. I'm not too worried about him being dinged right now, but it is a fair question.
It's a fair question, I think, especially from the lens of if you've been kind of a KJ Osbourn stan or in on him in previous years. I have not. So I look at this as more of a runaway. It's Jordan Addison. Like, I think that really, I just look at KJ Osbourn's a guy that's flashed in multiple seasons, but never put it together. And that's just because KJ Osbourn is who he is. He's a serviceable slot wide receiver. He's not a guy that's going to command targets in an offense. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's far away clearly Jordan Addison is the wide receiver 2. And if anything, I mean, you tell me this, Bob, like, do you see this year Jordan Addison out targeting TJ Hawkinson? Because I think that's probably not just like the median. I think that's probably what's going to happen. But where do you see that falling, like, as far as the target tree? Do you think it's Hawkinson handedly over Addison, or are you in the Addison camp?
I think it's going to be pretty close. I think both those guys could flirt with 100. And that's going to hurt Osbourn, who I think is maybe a guy I'm drafting to avoid zeros, right? Like, is wide receiver 5 or 6 that if I need a guy who's not going to get me zeros, Derek Brown won't get you any zeros. I hope he gets some zeros in the Scott Fishbowl draft this weekend. Goes with the, as Andy Behrens once accused me of in the Kings Classic, Bob Harris going with the classic 0 good player strategy. Hopefully we both avoid that. Really look forward to hanging out with you, man, and everyone else there. Again, Ray Garvin will be there, Eric Moody drafting with us, Fantasy Sven, and many others. Casey Kasem headlining the entire affair. So if you're in the Dallas area, come see that. Come see us. Come say hi. Otherwise, go to Fantasy Pros and say hi to Derek there, or his Twitter @dbro_FFB is where you'll find him. And you'll find him back here at some point, and also on the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio program. Football Diehards, we're going back to 4 nights a week starting next week. We'll be on this Saturday. It's later than usual because I'm doing a Scott Fishbowl draft, people. So I will be on from 7 to 9, I believe, Eastern time. Marcus Grant will be joining us on that program. So dial it in, people. Go to FootballDiehards.com. The Pro Forecast and the Football Diehards magazines are available there, as is all the premium content. Promo code DIEHARDS to get 15% off everything you want. And again, go to Fantasy Pros. You already do. Use the expert consensus ranking, but only pick Derek. Derek Brown. Use just his. Look, everyone there is great. Everyone who contributes there is great. So love all the work there. Derek, appreciate you so much for coming on. Appreciate everyone for showing up and sitting through all this. And look forward to it again. Remember, no Saturday because we're drafting. We'll see you again next